There are countries shaped by geography, and then there is China, a civilization that spent thousands of years reshaping geography itself. Here, mountains have been carved into farms, rivers have been divided, redirected, and lifted across watersheds. Deserts have been crossed by railways and held back with vast belts of vegetation. Fishing villages have become megacities. Valleys have disappeared beneath reservoirs, while bridges now hang where only birds once crossed. Look at China from above, and the country appears to contain two maps. The first was made by nature, a world of Himalayan peaks, high plateaus, violent rivers, fertile plains, dry basins, tropical forests, and immense deserts. The second was made by people, walls, canals, terraces, reservoirs, highways, ports, power grids, and cities built at immense scale. These two maps overlap, but they do not always agree. Nature placed much of China's water in the south, and many of its driest cities in the north. It raised the west into some of the highest land on earth, while leaving most of the population concentrated on the eastern plains. It filled the interior with mountains that divide communities and rivers that sometimes destroy the settlements they support. For more than 2,000 years, Chinese states and communities have responded to these imbalances with the same extraordinary belief: geography may set the conditions, but it does not have to determine the outcome. That belief produced some of humanity's greatest engineering achievements. It also displaced communities, altered ecosystems, exhausted rivers, submerged history, and created new risks that will endure for generations. This is not simply the story of a nation conquering nature. It is the story of a civilization locked in a permanent negotiation with it. To understand that struggle, we must begin in the West, where China rises toward the sky. The Tibetan Plateau is a vast high-altitude world of glaciers, grasslands, salt lakes, permafrost, and windswept valleys. Along its southern edge stand the Himalayas, formed by the continuing collision of continental plates. Mount Everest rises on the border between China and Nepal, but it is only the most famous peak in a landscape crowded with giants. The plateau is often described as the roof of the world. It is also one of Asia's most important water towers. Snowfields, glaciers, springs, and seasonal rainfall feed river systems that support enormous populations across China and beyond. The Yangtze, Yellow, Mekong, Salween, Brahmaputra, and other rivers begin in or near these highlands before flowing toward distant seas. From the plateau, China descends eastward in a series of enormous geographical steps. The first is the high Western Plateau itself. The second includes mountain ranges, deep basins, uplands, and plateaus extending through Xinjiang, Sichuan, Yunnan, Gansu, and Inner Mongolia. The third reaches the lower eastern plains, river valleys, deltas, and coastlines where most Chinese people live. This descent controls the direction of many rivers, but it does not distribute water evenly. Southern and southeastern China receive strong monsoon rainfall. Forests cover humid mountains. Rivers cross fertile valleys before reaching the sea through broad deltas. Northern and northwestern China are much drier. The Gobi stretches across the north. The Taklamakan occupies much of the Tarim Basin, surrounded by mountain ranges and historically crossed by travelers along chains of oases around its edges. Between these extremes are places that seem to belong to entirely different continents. In the southwest, limestone has dissolved into towers, sinkholes, caves, and underground rivers. Around Guilin, karst peaks rise from fields and waterways in forms celebrated in Chinese painting for centuries. In Yunnan, tropical valleys sit beneath cold mountains. Rivers run through parallel gorges, separated by steep ranges that create extraordinary ecological and cultural diversity. In Sichuan, a fertile basin lies enclosed by mountains and highlands. In the north, the lowest plateau forms a world of soft yellow earth cut by ravines. Along the east coast, low plains and deltas face the Pacific, bringing access to maritime trade, but also exposure to typhoons, flooding, erosion, and rising seas. China is therefore not one landscape. It is a collection of geographical worlds forced into a single political and economic system. The challenge of connecting them has shaped Chinese civilization from its earliest foundations. Most of the country's population lives in the eastern portion of its territory. The high mountains, deserts, and plateaus of the west contain vast space but far fewer people. The fertile plains, river basins, and coastal regions of the east contain dense settlement, agriculture, industry, and many of China's largest cities. Resources and demand rarely exist in the same place. Water must move toward dry cities. Electricity must travel from distant dams, solar fields, wind farms, and coal regions toward industrial centers. Food must move from farms to urban populations. Manufactured goods must travel from inland factories to coastal ports. People must cross mountains, rivers, deserts, and provincial borders in search of work. China's landscape presents a problem of scale, but scale is also the method China has repeatedly used to solve it. The first great struggle was with water. The Yellow River is one of the central rivers of Chinese history. Its basin supported early agricultural communities, cities, kingdoms, and dynasties. But the same river that nourished civilization repeatedly threatened to erase it. The river's yellow color comes from sediment, much of it carried from the Loess Plateau. Loess is a fine soil deposited by wind over immense periods. It can be fertile and easy to cultivate, but when vegetation is removed, it is also extremely vulnerable to erosion. Rain cuts through exposed slopes and carries soil into streams. Those streams feed the Yellow River, which transports enormous quantities of sediment toward the east. When the river reaches flatter terrain, the current slows and some sediment settles. Communities built levees to prevent floods, but sediment continued accumulating within the confined channel, gradually raising the riverbed. In some places, the river flowed above the level of surrounding fields and villages. The structure designed to protect the people could increase the scale of disaster when it failed. Water breaking through a levee could spread across the plain, destroy settlements, and establish a completely different route toward the sea. Over recorded history, the lower Yellow River changed course repeatedly. Its mouth shifted across great distances. Floods killed people, displaced communities, ruined harvests, and destabilized governments. The river did not behave like a permanent line on a map. It wandered, it rose, it broke through human boundaries, it delivered fertility and destruction through the same current. Controlling water became one of the fundamental duties of the Chinese state. A ruler was not expected merely to command armies and collect taxes. The government had to maintain canals, repair dikes, organize labor, store grain, respond to famine, and protect agricultural land. Floods and failed harvests were more than natural disasters. They could be interpreted as evidence that the state had lost competence, harmony, or even the mandate of heaven. Hydraulic engineering became political legitimacy made visible. One of China's oldest cultural heroes is Yu the Great, remembered for bringing a legendary flood under control. According to tradition, Yu succeeded where others failed because he did not attempt to block every current. He opened channels and guided the water toward the sea. Whether the story is understood as literal history, mythology, or a distant cultural memory of early water management, it expresses an idea that would appear throughout Chinese civilization. A river cannot always be defeated by standing in front of it. Sometimes it must be studied, divided, redirected, and allowed to move. That principle reached one of its most extraordinary expressions in Sichuan. The Min River descends from mountains toward the Chengdu Plain. In ancient times, seasonal flooding threatened the area, while uneven water distribution limited farming. During the 3rd century before the Common Era, construction of the Dujiangyan irrigation system began under the official Li Bing, with tradition also crediting his son. Instead of stopping the entire river behind a giant wall, the system worked with its flow. A dividing structure known as the fish mouth separated the river into inner and outer channels. The shape and position of the channels helped distribute different proportions of water according to the season. Another part of the system released excess water and sediment. A passage cut through the mountain directed water toward the plain. The river was divided, guided, and allowed to clear itself. Dujiangyan helped reduce flooding while expanding irrigation across the Chengdu region. The fertile plain that emerged became one of China's great agricultural centers. More than 2,000 years later, the system still distributes water. Its survival is not the result of ancient construction alone. Generations of workers maintained, repaired, cleared, and adjusted it. Dujiangyan is therefore not a dead monument. It is a relationship between river, land, engineering, and human care that has continued across dynasties, wars, revolutions, and technological eras. Its genius lies not in overpowering the Min River, but in recognizing that control can come from cooperation. Elsewhere, Chinese communities use the same principle on a smaller but no less beautiful scale. In southern Yunnan, the Ailao Mountains rise above the valleys of the Red River. The slopes are steep, flat farmland is scarce, and rainwater naturally moves downhill too quickly for rice cultivation. Over roughly 13 centuries, the Hani people transformed these mountains into one of the world's most remarkable agricultural landscapes. They carved thousands of terraces into the slopes. Forests remain near the mountaintops, capturing moisture and protecting springs. Villages sit below the forests. Channels guide water through the settlements and into terraces descending toward the valleys. When the fields are flooded, each terrace reflects the sky. From a distance, the landscape can look like a mountain covered in broken mirrors, but its beauty is produced by function. The forests, villages, channels, animals, and rice fields form a connected system. Water carries nutrients downhill. Livestock and organic waste help fertilize the terraces. Communities maintain canals and coordinate how water is shared. Destroy the forest at the top, and the water system below may weaken. Neglect the channels and fields can dry. Allow a terrace wall to collapse and the damage may spread downward. The entire mountain must be managed as one living structure. The Hani did not place farms on a mountain. They redesigned the mountain as a watershed. Similar landscapes appear throughout southern China. Terraces climb hillsides in Guangxi and Guizhou. Tea plantations cover humid slopes in Fujian, Zhejiang, Yunnan, and other regions. Villages sit between forests and fields, according to patterns refined across generations. These transformations were rarely created by a single ruler or completed in a single period. They emerged through the accumulated work of families and communities. Field by field, people altered the angle of the land. Channel by channel, they changed the movement of water. Stone by stone, they made steep slopes productive. China's geography was remade not only through imperial ambition, but through millions of ordinary decisions repeated for centuries. As states expanded, however, local adaptation was no longer enough. The rulers of large territories faced a greater challenge. How could distant regions be defended, supplied, taxed, and connected? One answer crossed the northern mountains. The Great Wall is commonly imagined as one unbroken stone barrier stretching across China. In reality, it is a vast collection of fortifications built by different states and dynasties over many centuries. Before China was politically unified, rival kingdoms constructed walls against one another and against threats from frontier regions. After the Qin united much of the country in the 3rd century before the Common Era, older fortifications were linked and extended. Later dynasties abandoned some sections, created others, or changed the frontier entirely. The Ming dynasty constructed many of the dramatic brick and stone walls now familiar around Beijing, but elsewhere, the wall was made from rammed earth, gravel, reeds, timber, and materials taken directly from the surrounding landscape. Across all periods, the larger system extended for more than 20,000 kilometers. It included walls, trenches, passes, fortresses, watchtowers, beacon towers, horse tracks, garrisons, and supply settlements. The wall did not simply sit upon the landscape. It converted ridges, valleys, and desert corridors into military geography. Mountain crests gave defenders visibility. Narrow passes controlled movement. Watchtowers transmitted warnings. Fortified gates became points where travelers, goods, and animals could be inspected or taxed. Yet the wall was never an absolute seal. Merchants crossed it, armies broke through it, frontier communities lived around it. Nomadic and pastoral societies traded with agricultural regions to the south. Horses moved toward Chinese markets. Silk, tea, grain, tools, and manufactured goods moved north and west. At different moments, powers from beyond the wall conquered parts or all of China. Dynasties ruled territory on both sides. Alliances, marriages, markets, raids, and migrations made the frontier far more complex than a simple division between two civilizations. The wall represented separation, but it also created places of contact. It was a military project, a communication network, a transport corridor, a political symbol, and an attempt to make an uncertain frontier visible. Building it required more than stone and earth. Workers and soldiers needed food, clothing, tools, animals, roads, and shelter. Supplies had to reach remote mountains and deserts. Garrison towns required farms and water. The visible wall was only the outer edge of a much larger administrative system. From a mountain ridge, it can appear timeless. But the Great Wall is a record of constant change, changing borders, changing threats, changing dynasties, and changing ideas about where China ended. While walls addressed the northern frontier, another project confronted the internal divide between north and south. Over time, the Yangtze Basin and regions farther south became increasingly important sources of rice, grain, wealth, and commercial production. Northern capitals needed those resources, but China's major eastern rivers generally flow from west to east. Nature had not created an easy north-south waterway linking the country's richest southern regions with its political centers. Chinese states created one. The Grand Canal developed from older regional waterways, constructed and connected across many centuries. Major sections were joined during the Sui dynasty, creating a transport route between the lower Yangtze region and northern China. Later dynasties repaired, extended, abandoned, and redirected different parts of the system. At its greatest scale, the canal connected Beijing and Hangzhou across roughly 1,800 kilometers. It crossed or linked the basins of several major rivers, including the Yellow River and Yangtze. The challenge was far greater than digging a long trench. Water levels changed across the route. Seasonal floods damaged embankments. Sediment blocked channels. Sections needed reliable water supplies. Boats had to cross high points and move between waterways at different elevations. Engineers constructed reservoirs, feeder channels, sluices, embankments, gates, and locks. Workers dredged silt and repaired banks. The Grand Canal became an artificial river woven through natural ones. It carried grain collected as tax toward imperial capitals. It moved soldiers, officials, merchants, craftsmen, travelers, and government supplies. Cities grew along its banks. Warehouses, markets, workshops, bridges, temples, and docks transformed the waterway into a long corridor of economic and cultural exchange. Regional foods traveled, dialects encountered one another, news and ideas moved with boats. Communities that might otherwise have remained distant became part of a shared commercial system. The canal did not merely transport grain, it helped transport China to itself. It allowed political centers in the north to depend on agricultural production in the south. It strengthened imperial administration across regions that geography had placed far apart. But maintaining it required continuous intervention. When dynasties weakened, canal maintenance could decline. When the Yellow River changed course, it disrupted connected waterways. Flood, war, sediment, and political decisions repeatedly altered the system. The canal survived not because its construction permanently defeated geography, but because people kept rebuilding the connection. This pattern would define China's history. When resources and demand existed in different places, the answer was often to construct a link between them. Sometimes the link was a canal, sometimes it was a road, sometimes it was an entire city. Imperial capitals were among the most carefully designed expressions of political geography. Beijing stands on the northern edge of the North China Plain, near mountains and routes leading toward the frontier. Its position offered strategic advantages, but also created logistical challenges. The city was far from many of the richest southern agricultural regions. The Grand Canal helped supply it. Within the capital, architecture organized power through space. The Forbidden City was constructed around a monumental north-south axis. Gates, courtyards, halls, walls, and ceremonial spaces regulated movement and visibility. Access became more restricted as one approached the center. The arrangement transformed political hierarchy into physical experience. The imperial city did not simply occupy Beijing, it ordered it. Beyond the palace, the capital depended on reservoirs, springs, canals, roads, granaries, defensive passes, and supply networks reaching across the country. Beijing could function because distant landscapes were made to support it. That dependence continues in modern form. The city's food, water, energy, construction materials, workers, and manufactured goods arrive through systems extending far beyond its boundaries. No megacity is contained within the skyline visible from its center. Its true geography includes every region required to keep it alive. For centuries, Chinese communities also transformed lowlands and deltas. Along the Yangtze Delta, dikes and canals managed the boundary between land and water. Wetlands were drained or controlled. Fields were protected from floods. Towns developed beside waterways used as streets. In places such as Suzhou, canals flowed past homes, gardens, stone bridges, workshops, and markets. Water was transportation, drainage, scenery, and economic infrastructure at the same time. Farther south, the Pearl River Delta developed through a complex interaction of rivers, tidal channels, islands, farmland, fish ponds, ports, and coastal settlements. These landscapes were neither entirely natural nor entirely artificial. They were waterscapes shaped by centuries of negotiation, but the scale of transformation accelerated dramatically in the modern era. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, China faced internal conflict, foreign intervention, population pressure, economic instability, floods, droughts, and the decline of imperial institutions. Older irrigation and transport systems remained essential, but many were damaged, neglected, or insufficient for a changing society. After the founding of the People's Republic in 1949, transforming the physical landscape became central to national development. The new state inherited a country where most people lived in rural areas, and many communities remained vulnerable to flood, drought, and food shortage. Governments mobilized labor to build reservoirs, canals, embankments, terraces, drainage systems, and irrigation networks. Some projects created lasting benefits. Others were poorly designed, ecologically destructive, or completed at enormous human cost. The period revealed both the power and danger of believing that nature could be conquered through determination alone. One of the most striking examples is the Red Flag Canal in Henan. The mountainous area around Linzhou faced severe water scarcity. Beginning in 1960, workers cut a canal along cliffs and through tunnels to divert water from the Zhuojiang River. Much of the construction was completed with limited machinery. Workers broke rock, built channels along exposed slopes, and removed material by hand. The main canal and its network of branches eventually stretched across a vast area. For communities receiving more dependable water, the system transformed agriculture and daily life. It became a national symbol of collective endurance. But from a distance, heroic language can hide individual experience. The canal was created during years of hardship. Construction was dangerous. Workers faced accidents, exhaustion, and shortages. The finished waterway appears as a clean line across the mountain. That line contains thousands of personal stories. This is true of almost every great project. Engineering photographs show structures. They rarely show all the lives reorganized around them. The largest transformation of China's human geography began when industrialization and urbanization accelerated during the late 20th century. For generations, most Chinese people lived in villages and depended directly on agriculture. Then hundreds of millions moved toward factories, construction sites, towns, and cities. Around 1980, only about 1/5 of the population was urban. Within a few decades, the share approached 2/3, making this one of the largest movements of people in human history. The migration physically reconstructed the country. Fields became industrial parks. Villages were absorbed by urban districts. Coastlines became ports, and apartment towers rose where families had cultivated crops. Airports, metro systems, universities, factories, logistics centers, and highways redrew the map. Few places embody that acceleration more clearly than Shenzhen. The region once contained smaller settlements, fields, hills, fishing communities, and a coastline facing Hong Kong. After Shenzhen became one of China's first special economic zones in 1980, investment, manufacturing, and migration arrived with extraordinary force. Factories multiplied, workers came from across the country, and the skyline climbed almost as quickly as the population. Shenzhen developed into a center of electronics, technology, design, finance, and advanced manufacturing. People brought their languages, foods, skills, and ambitions into a city that appeared to be inventing its identity while building it. But Shenzhen did not rise on empty land. Older villages were surrounded or absorbed. Wetlands and mangroves came under pressure. Hills were cut, coastlines were modified, and development extended over reclaimed land. Migrant labor powered the transformation, while access to housing and public services remained unequal. The new city connected China to the global economy, but it also demonstrated that urbanization does not erase boundaries, it rearranges them. Shanghai tells the story from the edge of the sea. The city stands beside the Huangpu River, near the mouth of the Yangtze, where inland waterways meet maritime trade. Across from the historic Bund, Pudong became a district of towers, transport hubs, homes, and financial institutions. Yet the geography that made Shanghai powerful also makes it vulnerable. The city occupies low-lying deltaic land, exposed to river floods, intense rainfall, typhoons, subsidence, and rising seas. Levees, pumps, drainage tunnels, reservoirs, and coastal defenses protect a skyline whose survival depends on keeping water in carefully controlled places. Shanghai cannot simply retreat from the coast because the coast is the source of much of its importance. It must remain near the water while defending itself from it. Farther south, the Pearl River Delta has grown into a connected urban region containing Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Dongguan, Foshan, Zhuhai, Hong Kong, Macau, and other cities. Factories, ports, railways, and highways spread across a landscape once defined by rivers, wetlands, islands, farms, and fishing settlements. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge crosses the estuary through bridges, artificial islands, and an undersea tunnel. Its greatest effect is not visual. It changes practical distance, pulling cities on opposite sides of the water into a tighter transport network. China has repeated that process across the interior. Chongqing rises through steep hills above the Yangtze and Jialing rivers, where streets occupy different vertical levels and trains disappear through tunnels before emerging above valleys. The city does not seem placed on the terrain so much as woven through it. In Guizhou, expressways cross deep limestone valleys on some of the highest bridges on Earth. A journey that once followed long mountain roads can become dramatically shorter. Farmers reach markets faster, emergency services travel more reliably, and tourists enter places that once felt remote. Connection, however, can transform a region in conflicting ways. A road may bring visitors into a village while carrying its younger generation away. A bridge may support local business or allow economic activity to bypass the community beneath it. No transport system has compressed China more completely than high-speed rail. In less than 2 decades, the country built tens of thousands of kilometers of high-speed track, forming by far the largest network of its kind. Trains now join major coastal cities with industrial centers and inland provincial capitals. Across the plains, long viaducts keep routes straight while passing above roads, farms, waterways, and settlements. In the southwest, tracks alternate between tunnels and bridges because high-speed trains cannot follow the sharp curves and steep gradients of mountain roads. A passenger may enter darkness inside one mountain, emerge above a river, and disappear into the next mountain within seconds. In the northeast, the network confronts severe cold. In western regions, it faces altitude, wind, sand, seismic risk, and enormous temperature changes. Every route is a negotiation with geology. Stations also reshape the cities they serve. New districts rise around transport hubs, drawing apartments, offices, hotels, bus terminals, and metro lines toward former outskirts. The station does not merely serve urban growth, it redirects it. High-speed rail reduces travel time, expands domestic tourism, and can release conventional tracks for freight and slower passenger services. It also requires immense investment, continuous maintenance, land, energy, and debt. Busy corridors carry huge passenger volumes, while some routes and stations remain less intensively used. From an older train, the landscape unfolds gradually. From a high-speed carriage, villages, factories, rivers, and mountains become brief flashes between stations. The network makes China feel smaller, but it cannot eliminate the physical limits of the places it connects. And one limit has shaped China more than almost any other. Water is distributed unevenly across the country. Southern China contains much of the nation's freshwater. Monsoon rainfall feeds the Yangtze Basin and other southern river systems. Northern China is far drier, yet it contains major cities, industries, agricultural regions, and a large population. Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, Henan, Shandong, and neighboring areas have faced intense pressure on rivers and underground water. For years, wells reach deeper beneath the North China Plain. When groundwater is removed faster than nature replaces it, water tables fall. In some areas, excessive extraction has contributed to land subsidence. The old geographical imbalance became more severe as cities and industries expanded. Ancient China had moved grain north through the Grand Canal. Modern China decided to move the water itself. The South to North Water Diversion Project is one of the largest water transfer systems ever attempted. It is organized around several routes designed to carry water from the Yangtze Basin toward northern regions. The eastern route uses and parallels sections of the historic Grand Canal. Because parts of the route require water to move upward across changes in elevation, pumping stations lift it northward. The middle route begins at the Danjiangkou Reservoir and carries water through a long canal toward northern cities, including Beijing and Tianjin. Much of this water moves by gravity. The canal crosses roads, rivers, settlements, and provincial boundaries. Aqueducts carry it above some waterways, while tunnels take it beneath others. The western route has remained the most difficult and controversial vision. It would involve high-altitude river systems, complex geology, remote terrain, and ecologically sensitive regions. The functioning routes have supplied enormous quantities of water to northern communities. They have allowed some cities to reduce dependence on groundwater and helped restore certain rivers and underground reserves. For people in Beijing, water flowing from a household tap may have traveled more than 1,000 kilometers. But transferring water does not create new water. It changes who receives it. Source regions must protect water quality because pollution can now travel north through the system. Reservoir construction and canal routes required communities to relocate. Changes in water use can affect farming, fisheries, ecosystems, and development opportunities in donor regions. The transfer also requires constant management, treatment, monitoring, and maintenance. It addresses scarcity by expanding supply, but scarcity is also influenced by demand. If cities continue growing without regard for local limits, even the largest canal may become insufficient. This creates a difficult question. Should water be moved toward population and industry? Or should population and industry adjust to the places where water naturally exists? China's answer has been a combination of transfer and conservation. Cities promote water-saving technology, wastewater reuse, groundwater recovery, industrial efficiency, and changes in pricing. Yet the tension remains. A canal can solve a shortage at the tap without removing the forces that produce the shortage. The desire to control water reached its most monumental expression on the Yangtze River. The Yangtze is China's longest river. It begins in the Western Highlands and crosses the country before reaching the sea near Shanghai. Its basin contains major agricultural regions, industrial centers, cities, wetlands, lakes, and ports. The river has always been a source of life and movement. It has also produced catastrophic floods. For generations, Chinese leaders and engineers imagined a great dam in the Three Gorges region. Supporters argued that it could reduce flood risk, generate electricity, improve navigation, and strengthen economic connections between the interior and the coast. Critics warned about displacement, sediment, landslides, ecological disruption, cultural loss, and the danger of making so much of the river depend on one structure. The dam that emerged is more than 2 kilometers long and over 180 meters high. Its power station has a generating capacity of 22.5 gigawatts. Behind it, the reservoir extends for hundreds of kilometers through the former river valley. The project generates immense quantities of electricity without directly burning coal. It allows much larger vessels to travel inland. Locks lift ships past the dam, and a separate ship lift assists smaller vessels. The reservoir can hold water during periods of dangerous flow, helping protect regions downstream. These benefits are real, so are the costs. More than 1.2 million people were relocated as the water rose. Towns, villages, fields, homes, factories, roads, archaeological sites, and burial places disappeared beneath the reservoir. New settlements were constructed on higher ground. Some residents moved to other regions. Statistics can record the number of people relocated. They cannot fully describe the experience of watching familiar streets vanish beneath water. A home is more than a structure. It is a position within a community, a view from a window, a path to a field, the location of an ancestor's grave, and a collection of memories that cannot be moved by truck. The reservoir changed the physical behavior of the region. Valleys became bays. Mountain slopes became shorelines. Ports moved. Roads were rebuilt. Sediment that once traveled downstream began behaving differently. Scientists monitored landslides and increased seismic activity around the reservoir area. Fluctuating water levels repeatedly wet and dry vulnerable slopes. River species faced altered habitats and migration routes. Downstream wetlands and lakes experienced changes in the timing, quantity, and character of water and sediment. The Three Gorges Dam did not merely block a river, it created a new geography. It reduced certain risks while creating others. It generated lower carbon electricity while imposing ecological and human costs. It improved navigation while submerging places that had existed for generations. It is both an engineering achievement and a permanent argument about the meaning of progress. The contrast with Dujiangyan is striking. One system divides and guides a river without stopping it entirely. The other places an immense barrier across the current and creates a reservoir visible from space. Both respond to the same desire, to make water more predictable. But they represent very different relationships between human power and nature. China's rivers reveal the limits of the word control. A dam can regulate flow, but it cannot remove rainfall, sediment, geology, or climate from the system. A canal can transfer water, but it cannot end scarcity. A levee can contain a river, but it can also increase the consequences of failure. Engineering does not eliminate nature. It changes the conditions under which nature acts. The same lesson appears on the Loess Plateau. The plateau stretches across a large region of northern and central China. Its deep yellow soil can support agriculture, but it erodes easily when vegetation is removed. For centuries, farming, tree cutting, grazing, population pressure, and repeated disturbance exposed slopes to rain and wind. Gullies cut deeply into the land. Soil entered tributaries and flowed toward the Yellow River. In many communities, environmental damage and poverty reinforced one another. Farmers cultivated steep slopes because they needed food. Cultivation increased erosion. Erosion reduced productivity. Lower productivity forced families to use even more marginal land. Breaking this cycle required more than planting trees. Beginning in the late 20th century, large restoration programs changed how land was used. Steep fields were terraced or converted to grass and forest. Gullies were stabilized. Small dams captured sediment. Grazing was restricted in selected areas. Farmers shifted toward orchards, enclosed livestock, higher value crops, and alternative sources of income. Major rehabilitation projects restored extensive areas of degraded land. Vegetation cover increased. Soil loss declined. Agricultural productivity improved in many communities. Some household incomes rose significantly. Land that had appeared dry and deeply scarred became greener. The visual change was so dramatic that the Loess Plateau became an international example of landscape restoration. But even success contains complexity. Trees require water. Planting dense forests in dry areas can reduce runoff and lower soil moisture. Species suited to one region may fail in another. Restrictions on grazing and hillside farming can damage livelihoods if families are not offered realistic alternatives. A landscape cannot be restored through appearance alone. Making the ground green does not automatically make the ecosystem sustainable. Restoration must match soil, rainfall, native vegetation, water availability, and human needs. The lowest plateau demonstrates that damaged land can recover. It also shows that ecological recovery is a social process. The lives of farmers, herders, and local communities must change with the land. Farther north, China has confronted desertification and the movement of sand. The Gobi and other dry regions are often imagined as empty spaces. They are not. They contain grasslands, wildlife, pastoral communities, mineral resources, transport corridors, and settlements dependent on scarce water. Some deserts are natural ecosystems. Desertification is different. It occurs when productive dry land is degraded through a combination of climate, overgrazing, vegetation loss, poor land management, and other pressures. China has launched vast programs to reduce this degradation. The 3 North Shelter Belt program supported tree planting and vegetation restoration across northern regions. Other projects used shrubs, grasses, straw grids, and barriers to stabilize dunes. Along vulnerable roads and railways, workers place straw into the sand in square patterns. These grids reduce surface wind and slow the movement of dunes. Native vegetation may then grow inside the protected spaces. Near settlements, shelter belts can reduce wind and protect farmland. Some projects have succeeded in stabilizing sand and restoring degraded land. Others have struggled. Trees planted in environments too dry to support them may die or consume scarce groundwater. Large areas planted with a single species can be vulnerable to disease and pests. Trying to turn every dry landscape into a forest can create a new ecological mistake. The goal cannot be to make deserts disappear. It must be to prevent human-caused degradation while respecting the climate and ecology of dry regions. Today, another kind of human-made landscape is spreading across China's deserts and dry plains. Solar panels cover large areas of open land. Wind turbines rise across northern grasslands, mountain passes, and coastal waters. In some solar projects, vegetation grows between the panels. Sheep graze beneath them. The structures reduce wind at the surface and create shade that can change local moisture conditions. But renewable energy is not without physical impact. Solar farms occupy land. Wind projects require roads, foundations, transmission lines, and maintenance. Hydropower changes rivers. The materials used in batteries, turbines, panels, and power grids must be mined, processed, manufactured, and transported. Clean energy does not exist outside geography. It creates a different geography. Many of China's strongest wind and solar resources are located far from the coastal cities that consume the most electricity. To bridge that distance, China built ultra-high voltage transmission lines capable of carrying power across thousands of kilometers. Electricity generated in western or northern regions can support factories and cities in the east. The power grid becomes an invisible map layered over the visible country. Once again, China responds to geographical imbalance through connection. Water moves north, electricity moves east. Manufactured goods move toward ports. Workers move toward cities. Food moves from fields to urban markets. Every movement depends on infrastructure, and every piece of infrastructure changes the places it crosses. Agriculture remains one of the most important of these transformed landscapes. China must feed a vast population with limited arable land. Mountains, plateaus, and deserts cover much of the territory. Productive farmland is concentrated in plains, river valleys, deltas, basins, and intensively managed slopes. Regional farming systems developed according to climate. Wheat, millet, and maize became central across much of northern China. Rice shaped many southern landscapes. Tea covered humid hills. Cotton and fruit grew in irrigated dry regions. Pastoral communities managed animals across northern grasslands and the Tibetan Plateau. In some southern areas, farmers combined fish ponds, mulberry trees, silkworms, vegetables, livestock, and rice fields in systems designed to recycle water and nutrients. Modern technology raised production through improved seeds, machinery, irrigation, fertilizers, greenhouses, cold storage, roads, and digital logistics. Produce can now move rapidly from remote farms towards cities. Online platforms allow consumers to buy directly from agricultural regions they may never visit. But higher production has carried environmental costs. Excessive fertilizer entered rivers and lakes. Pesticides affected soil and ecosystems. Groundwater declined in intensively farmed northern regions. Greenhouses, plastic films, livestock operations, and industrial agriculture created new forms of waste. Urban expansion consumed farmland near some of the country's most productive cities. China responded by identifying important agricultural land that should be protected from development. But a field near a growing city may be worth far more as construction land than as farmland. Protecting food security, therefore, means resisting the economic force of urbanization. This is a different type of geographical engineering. It does not require moving earth. It requires drawing a boundary and refusing to build beyond it. Similar boundaries now appear in environmental policy. Decades of industrial growth raised incomes and modernized the country, but factories, mines, power plants, and construction also polluted air, rivers, lakes, and soil. Stricter rules, monitoring, cleaner technology, public transport, and industrial upgrades improved conditions in many regions. Urban air became cleaner in numerous cities. Polluted riverfronts were restored, and some wetlands returned. Yet pollution can move rather than disappear. A coastal city may breathe cleaner air while consuming electricity generated in an inland coal region. The same interconnectedness shapes urban flooding. When fields and wetlands are covered by roads, roofs, and concrete, rain can no longer soak naturally into the ground. Water races across hard surfaces and overwhelms drains, allowing a water-scarce city to flood during a violent storm. Sponge city projects use parks, ponds, wetlands, green roofs, permeable surfaces, and restored streams to absorb and release rainfall more slowly. The idea echoes the logic of Dujiang-Yan. Control does not always mean resistance. Sometimes it means creating space for water to move. But no green roof can make development in a natural floodplain completely safe. Technology works only when cities also protect wetlands, respect drainage routes, and accept that some land should not be built upon. The coast presents the same dilemma on a larger scale. China's ports and eastern cities depend on access to the sea, yet low-lying districts face storms, erosion, subsidence, saltwater intrusion, and rising water. Sea walls and pumps reduce risk, while mangroves and tidal wetlands provide protection that concrete cannot fully reproduce. Some land can be defended. Some must make room for water. The most difficult decision may be recognizing where further construction creates more danger than security. These choices cannot be measured only in kilometers, gigawatts, or towers. A valley may contain a village, a sacred place, a grazing route, an orchard, a dialect, and generations of memory. A mountain is more than an obstacle, and a desert is not empty because relatively few people live there. China's many ethnic communities maintain distinct histories, languages, religions, and relationships with land. The Tibetan Plateau is both an engineering frontier and a cultural homeland. Xinjiang is both a corridor towards Central Asia and a region of mountains, oases, deserts, cities, and deep historical roots. Inner Mongolia's grasslands reflect pastoral traditions as well as mining, farming, and ecological restoration. National infrastructure can connect these regions physically. It does not make them culturally identical. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway demonstrates this complexity. The line crosses high-altitude terrain, permafrost, grasslands, river sources, and areas of extreme cold. Engineers developed elevated sections, cooling systems, and other methods to protect tracks built over ground that freezes and thaws. Wildlife passages were incorporated along parts of the route. The railway strengthened the movement of passengers, tourists, goods, investment, and government administration between the plateau and the rest of China. It also intensified concerns about ecological pressure, cultural change, migration, and resource development. A railway can cross a plateau in hours. Understanding the people and history of that plateau takes far longer. The same tension appears along the ancient Silk Roads. For centuries, travelers moved through the Hexi Corridor, a narrow route between mountains and desert, connecting the Chinese heartland with Central Asia. Oasis towns became centers of trade, art, religion, and cultural exchange. Silk traveled west. Horses, glass, precious goods, artistic styles, music, and ideas traveled east. Merchants, monks, diplomats, craftsmen, migrants, and armies crossed the region. At Dunhuang, the Mogao caves preserve murals, sculpture, and manuscripts reflecting centuries of movement between civilizations. Modern highways, railways, pipelines, transmission lines, and logistics centers now pass through or near many of these historical corridors. The vehicles have changed. The geographical logic has not. Mountains still channel movement into passes. Deserts still make water essential. Oases still determine where settlements can survive. Border regions still depend on exchange. China continues building new routes across landscapes that have connected worlds for thousands of years. The speed of modern construction can make the past appear distant, yet older and newer geographies remain intertwined. High-speed trains pass fields supplied by ancient channels. Glass towers rise near historic neighborhoods. Container ships move beside fishing boats, and expressways cross routes once followed by caravans. Tourism gives some historic landscapes new economic value, but it can also turn living communities into performances. The Hani terraces endure because people continue farming, sharing water, and repairing their walls. If the fields become only scenery, the system that created their beauty may weaken. The same principle applies to the Great Wall and Grand Canal. Their future depends not only on restoring stone or protecting selected landmarks, but on maintaining the landscapes, waterways, settlements, and human knowledge around them. Construction creates an object. Civilization maintains a relationship. That distinction matters because China's next great test may be maintenance rather than expansion. Bridges must be inspected, railways repaired, reservoirs managed, canals cleared, urban pipes replaced, and restored forests protected. Solar panels and wind turbines will eventually need recycling or replacement. There is no spectacular opening ceremony for a repaired drainage pipe or a carefully managed wetland. Yet maintenance determines whether today's achievement becomes tomorrow's inheritance or tomorrow's burden. Dujiangyan survived because generations cleared and adjusted it. The Hani terraces survived because communities maintained them. The Grand Canal functioned only when workers dredged channels and repaired banks. The Great Wall survives unevenly because some sections were preserved while others returned to the earth. A megaproject can be completed in years. A landscape must be cared for indefinitely. The challenge will grow as climate alters the conditions for which infrastructure was designed. Glaciers and snowfields feeding Asian rivers are changing. Heat, drought, extreme rain, and coastal flooding place new pressure on cities, reservoirs, farms, and power systems. A dam designed from past river records must operate in a future that may not resemble them. A seawall built for one level of danger may face another. A railway laid over permafrost may confront thawing ground. China will continue building. Few societies possess comparable engineering experience, industrial capacity, or ability to mobilize at scale. New transport, energy, water, and ecological projects will keep changing the map. The deeper question is what philosophy will guide them. One philosophy treats nature as an opponent. Mountains become barriers to drill. Rivers become forces to block. Deserts become empty land to conquer. And wetlands become space waiting for construction. The other treats nature as a system. Mountains shape water and climate. Rivers connect upstream and downstream life. Deserts possess ecological limits. Wetlands perform work that concrete must otherwise replace at enormous cost. China's history contains both approaches. Three Gorges represents the power of monumental intervention. Dujiangyan represents the intelligence of redirection. The south to north canals redistribute water across a national scale. The Hani terraces adapt agriculture to local contours, while the Gorges Plateau restoration attempts to repair damage by changing land use and livelihoods together. No single model can solve every problem, but the landscapes that endure longest share one quality. They do not ignore natural processes, they work through them. Seen from space, China's transformation is astonishing. City lights spread across eastern plains. Reservoirs fill mountain valleys. Roads and railways link urban regions. Terraces alter the texture of slopes. Ports extend into the sea, and solar fields form geometric patterns across deserts. The satellite image cannot show the farmer clearing a terrace channel before dawn, the worker maintaining tracks through winter cold, the herder adapting to new limits, or the family leaving a valley that will soon become a reservoir. The map records the project, human memory records the price. That is why China's remade geography cannot be understood through admiration or criticism alone. The Great Wall is an extraordinary achievement built through immense labor. The Grand Canal unified regions but demanded continuous intervention. Modern dams generate electricity and reduce some flood risks while displacing communities and transforming rivers. High-speed rail connects cities while consuming land, capital, and energy. Urbanization created opportunity for hundreds of millions while absorbing villages, fields, and wetlands. Restoration returned vegetation to degraded slopes, yet some interventions strained water or disrupted traditional livelihoods. Every achievement carries a second story. China's oldest landscapes also show the limits of confidence. The Yellow River repeatedly escaped its channels. Trees failed where planting ignored water. Reservoir slopes moved when their geology changed. Cities flooded where construction removed natural drainage. Nature did not always defeat the project. Sometimes it revealed what the project had failed to understand. A river carries more than water. It moves sediment, nutrients, fish, pollution, and life between distant regions. A forest shapes soil, temperature, water, habitat, and livelihoods. A mountain stores water and cultural meaning as well as rock. A coastline is a living boundary between river, sea, sediment, storm, wildlife, and settlement. When landscapes are viewed only as obstacles or resources, they become easier to transform and easier to misunderstand. Ancient systems offer a quieter kind of wisdom. Dujiangyan follows the current. The Hani terraces protect the forest above the fields. Oasis settlements follow the availability of water. Their survival came from observation repeated across generations. Modern China possesses satellites, sensors, computer models, tunnel-boring machines, high-strength materials, and electrical systems beyond anything ancient builders could imagine. The question is whether greater power will be accompanied by greater understanding. China has already shown that geography is not destiny. Mountains need not isolate every community. Deserts need not stop every railway. Dry cities can draw water from distant basins. Damaged land can recover. And journeys once measured in days can be completed in hours. But escaping one limit often creates dependence on another system. A northern city supplied by a distant canal depends on its source watershed. A coastal metropolis, protected by pumps and seawalls, depends on power and maintenance. A restored hillside depends on vegetation suited to its climate. A hydropower system depends on future river flow. Transformation does not remove dependence, it changes what society depends upon. For thousands of years, each generation inherited a country already altered by the one before it. Walls were extended, canals rebuilt, cities expanded, reservoirs filled, and damaged slopes restored. Each solution became part of the geography facing the next generation. China is still raising bridges, transferring water, expanding power grids, repairing ecosystems, and connecting regions. The map is not finished. Beneath every new layer, however, the original forces remain. The Himalayas continue rising. Rivers carry sediment. Rain follows climate rather than political borders. Deserts respond to wind. Water seeks the lowest ground, and coasts change with tides and storms. China did not simply build upon its geography. It studied it, redirected it, damaged it, repaired parts of it, and transformed it into one of the most complex human-shaped landscapes on Earth. Its walls reveal the desire to define space. Its canals reveal the desire to connect it. Its terraces reveal the patience to adapt. Its dams reveal the power to overwhelm. And its restored landscapes reveal the need to repair. From the stone ridges of the Great Wall to the flooded mirrors of the Hani terraces, from the ancient currents of Dujiangyan to the reservoir behind Three Gorges, China's landscape carries one enduring message. Human beings can change the map, but they cannot escape what the map connects. Every river redirected, every mountain opened, every valley flooded, and every city raised becomes part of a larger system that must be maintained, balanced, and eventually inherited. China may have remade its geography more dramatically than any civilization in history, but geography has never stopped remaking China. And between those two forces, human ambition and the limits of the earth, the final map is being